Hello everyone, welcome once again to the Watchalongs. 2 weeks, or 3 weeks in a row now. Imola, Monaco, and Spain, the final of the triple header in Europe. We've got practice one coming up in a couple of moments' time. Catalunya, a circuit that all drivers are familiar with, not necessarily in F1 cars. We've got racing balls, of course, the young lineup, Gabriel Bortoleto, Antonelli, Behrman. Any other drivers that have had not too much time in the car? I don't think so. Of course, a circuit that a lot of drivers have raced in their junior years, but we haven't done any pre-season testing here. We haven't done that since, I think, 2020. So it means that the cars don't have that kind of extra understanding. The teams don't have that extra understanding of what the car can do, and it's all based on the earlier part of the season to see what we can do. Now, looking at that, what have the cars got to look out for this weekend in Barcelona? Well, it is a pretty high downforce circuit. There are some straights, there are some high-speed corners, so you do have to really work with the tyres quite well, and it's going to be tough. It is a harder tyre allocation that they're going to be running this weekend, so we've got to watch out for what tyres they'll be using as well. And because of the harder tyre compounds, we should see the likes of Mercedes do pretty well. We might end up seeing the likes of Ferrari struggle, so look out for that. If that's going to be the case, I don't know, but we have seen Mercedes struggle a few weekends in a row now with Imola and Monaco. Of course, they're hoping for a reset, and they're hoping that they don't have any more technical difficulties, any technical faults that they have had. So all right, we have a few cars out or a few drivers out to give way to the FP3 drivers. So that is Victor Martin. In the Williams, of course, we've also got Esteban Ocon. Sitting out for Hirakawa, who gets another test in the Haas car. I think they tested the McLaren and the Alpine a few races ago, or they tested the Alpine definitely a few races ago in Japan, I think it was. But good to see a mix of cars. Oh, of course, Colapinto, another driver that hasn't had too much experience in the F1 cars. I just want to double check what tyre allocation will they be using, and hopefully we can figure that one out, because I forgot to get that data earlier on. Silly me. Maybe I can see it from here actually. Can't quite get to see them on this data point, so I will look to just search them up. C1, C2 and C3, so the hardest the hardest allocation I think you can get, although is there a C0? So the harder of the set of compounds. Definitely harder compared to what we've had in the last few weekends of racing. Sorry for the delay. Oh, we've been on mute the entire time. The Haas has gone off. Ria Harakawa off at the hairpin. Not very happy. Of course, they were very apologetic on the radio, knowing that it's not their car. They go straight into the pit lane as the team maybe asks them to cool down a little bit so they don't do it again. Carlos Sainz is on their way out, just getting ready to get in the car. There was a wall of engineers or mechanics in front of them, just stood there to try and block the view of the car as the Spaniard gets ready for the first of their home Grand Prix sessions. Alonso also their home Grand Prix, 51 minutes to go, and they are on the top of the table with the hard tyre. Only a couple of medium tyres so far. And I don't think we've seen any soft tyres at all. I'm just going to try and double check that. Yeah, no, only hard and medium tyres so far. So, really showing how it's going to go around here in Catalunya. We know that it's pretty hard on the tyres, so they'll be looking for that. Now, the biggest thing this weekend is the front wing regulations. I do believe that McLaren haven't brought any front wing changes, as they maybe tested it in Imola. I may be wrong on that. Other than that, all other teams have brought some changes to their front wings because of the flexi wing regulations. They've tightened the front wing load tests, so the performance gain will be a little bit less. The front wings won't be able to distort under load. This follows similar rear wing regulations introduced earlier this season as well. Cameras are installed now on the front wings, or they actually were installed from the 2024 Belgian Grand Prix to see what was going on with the cars. And just looking at some more details. Liam Lawson getting blocked here as they travel around the circuit in the opening minutes. I think that was Leclerc in the way. Seems to get blocked by the Ferraris a lot, does Liam Lawson. Frustrated. That was earlier on now as they go into the pit lane. They had some extra tools on their car. The aero performance grids, the metal kind of racks that they have as they test the airflow. You're allowed to do that in FP1 but not FP2 and FP3. Got to make sure that you get permission to do so. There's a little bit of to and fro on the radio there for Max Verstappen and his engineer, asking for a few settings to Max to try, and he says, no, I don't really want that. So I guess it kind of speeds up the setup process, or it means that you've just got a bit of a more difficult weekend. That is all. So, tolerance of slot gap variation under 75 kilos of load was initially 2 millimeters, more or less. It was reduced to 0.75 at the Chinese Grand Prix, and now it's been reduced since to 0.5 millimeters at the Japanese Grand Prix. That's for the rear wing. It's to prevent the mini DRS effect that we saw the McLaren doing. You could see the McLaren kind of having a very wobbly rear wing. The front wing, 100 kilos of load. The old limit was a 15 millimeter vertical deflection, and now it's 10 millimeters. 100 kilo side load, 20 millimeters it used to be, and now it's 15. So another decrease by 5 millimeters. And then it's the front wing flap flexibility, so the top flap, I believe that is. The old limit was 5 millimeters, and now it is 3 millimeters, so changed a little bit. So that's what we're looking at. a lot stiffer wings, it's going to mean that the kind of top speed and the airflow is going to be a little bit more complicated, a little bit tougher for teams to gain that extra performance. And we're going to see a few cars struggle. Of course, a lot of cars will have had to try and gain some lap time by making their car a little bit more effective in a straight line, and that may have come with the flexi wings. Now, we're kind of thinking that McLaren may have some problems with that, but they've already tested, I believe they've already tested a few front wing changes. So they're not necessarily a stranger to this, and they're going to be pretty strong around here, I reckon, anyway. So, although I don't feel that the gap may be as big as it would have been, I think the gap is still going to be fairly big, and other teams are going to be affected. Will it bring the entire field closer together? Quite possibly. The front wing is where it all begins with the aero package. You've got the airflow, it hits the front wing, and then it goes through the rest of the car. So it is important to make sure that that is the part that really helps the airflow the rest of the car, because it affects the entire car throughout kind of a lap. Now, if you get sudden changes on that and your car doesn't suit it, then you basically got a terrible race car. It's going to be difficult for the drivers to deal with. It's going to be difficult for the teams to understand, but they've known that this would have been the case for a while now, and that means they will have had some time to test it and know what they're doing. So they're not going to go completely blind into this, but it is definitely going to make some changes and have a few teething problems for a few teams, I reckon. But interested to see how this goes for everyone. Now, just back to those aero changes with the regulations this weekend, the biggest talking point that we will have for the Spanish Grand Prix. It's all with an aim to try and make the racing a little bit closer, and it's definitely seeming to be a better step. You know, you kind of have the car performing as it is, and the wings can't flex as much, so it means that you're not going to get that straight line performance, so the cars are closer in the corners and they don't pull away from each other in the straights. Whether that will be the outcome, we don't know. Science always tells its own story, so we'll find out of how that goes. But also, the teams create their own story. If they come up with new innovations, if they outperform the rest of the field, it can mean that the grid goes further away from each other sometimes. That's what you often see with regulation changes. We still seem to get the regulation changes, even though the cars always come a lot closer together towards the end of a regulation change. But it's the way of Formula 1, and it's the way it will get. Carlos Sainz is out on track. They set their first lap of the session. They go to P16. Victor Martin's also not set a lap so far. They're out on track and they go and set their lap. Or they will be setting their lap very, very shortly. The F2 driver, currently P8 in the standings. They got a P3 in the Saudi Arabia feature race. They almost had a chance at winning the Monaco Grand Prix, but ended up in the wall after trying to overtake around the outside in the first corner. They weren't really allowed to go through that easily. And that was the end of their weekend. Liam Lawson sat in front of one of the Mercedes, although it looks like the Mercedes is not, of Antonelli, on a quick lap anyway. Although they're not exactly on the slowest of first sectors either. Currently we see Lando Norris topping the times by 2/10. We've got Max Verstappen, who is close behind in P3. Then we've got Charles Leclerc, Piastri, Russell, Stroll, Hamilton, Antonelli, and Yuki Tsunoda finishing off the top 10. It's Gasly in P11, with Hülkenberg, Hadjar, Colapinto, Oliver Bowman in P15, Liam Lawson, Carlos Sainz, Rio Hirakawa in P18, and Bortoletto in P19, with Victor Martin in P20. The two FP1 rookie drivers, or FP1 drivers effectively, replacing Alex Albon and Esteban Ocon. That is it for the FP1 drivers. Everybody else are the permanent drivers, the permanent lineups for the team. Currently the top three all in the pit lane at the moment. It's Charles Leclerc, who is improving in that middle sector, looking to go fairly quickly. We've got Martin, who will set another improvement lap, currently 19 seconds away. They close up nicely to Bortoletto now. They are still a little way off the pack, however. So that's 2.6 seconds away from the top time. We've got about 8/10 between Carlos Sainz and Victor Martin. First laps, or first proper laps from either driver. I think Victor can be pretty happy with that one. There's a bit of a demo going on at the moment. You can see the ways the teams have decided to change their wings in various different ways. Some have done it the more traditional way. Some have tried to put forces in different places so the wings don't flex. It's very interesting, very creative. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if any cars end up failing inspection for this weekend. Of course, qualifying, you could end up getting disqualified and starting at the back. Of course, in the race, if you got disqualified, you score no points if you were in the points at all. It would just be Fernando Alonso's luck, wouldn't it? A great qualifying, and then they end up getting disqualified due to the front wing being a little bit too flexible. If that happens, I don't know what to say. So looking through the expectations this weekend, we've got Ferrari expected to struggle with the downforce. The softer car setup that they may need is going to be a problem as well. But we've got Mercedes, who should be doing pretty good with the harder allocation. As I said earlier on, look out for that. We've got Red Bull expected not to challenge for the front row, but could maybe work together in the race if Yuki Tsunoda can get things together. They need to be beating the Mercedes. That's what is being said, at least. However, is the Mercedes the faster car when it's in its peak performance? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it is when it's in its peak performance, but I think it can do. It's just really about whether the car can be dialed in. We've got McLaren not bringing any upgrades, as they are believed to have tested that front wing, of course, already. And then it's Alex Albon, who has been replaced by Martins and Riharawa, who also replaces Esteban Ocon. 36 minutes on the clock right now. Lots of hards and medium tyres running at the moment. No softs have been seen. Will we see them later on in the session to get a good idea of the initial performance? I think we may be able to. Although it will be the hards and the mediums that all the teams and drivers will be looking to crucially test, because that is going to be the biggest point that we could see in the race on Sunday. I reckon most soft tyre running will be done in FP2, where you get a good representation for tomorrow's time of the starting qualifying time and the race, of course, as well, but there'll be a mix of hards and softs then. Looking at the weather this weekend, we shouldn't have any rain coming throughout the weekend. We're going to see clouds on Sunday, but other than that, chance of rain, 10%, 0% today, 15% on Saturday and 10% on the Sunday. It is going to be, well, it's scheduled to be raining a little bit on the Monday. So if the weather does shift around, something could happen, but I don't think it's likely to be honest. I think it will stay as it is. There's not going to be any rain hype. We'll stay where we are. The two McLarens out on track, the two Williams out on track. We've got Colapinto, who goes into the pit lane as Gasly is out on track at the moment. Russell, the sole Mercedes. Lawson leaves the pit lane. So does Fernando Alonso. They're not going to block Carlos Sainz, as they will be able to move out, I believe, out of the way, and they do so nicely. Oscar Piastri improving the first sector. Will they improve in that middle sector? No, they are looking to try and go quicker in the final. What's it going to be for Oscar Piastri? And they don't improve. Overall, they did improve in that final sector, but 5 tenths away from Lando Norris's lap time in the end. They just stay where they are. Alonso hasn't improved on Norris's lap time so far. Verstappen's been in the pit lane for a while, to be honest. 8 laps on track. 7 laps for Carlos Sainz, of course, coming out late. And Bortoleto also has not too many laps. We've got Hulkenberg as well. So Sauber trying to figure out what's going on with the car at the moment. And it's Gasly who's really trying to get the laps in. Alpine effectively really trying to get the laps in. 15 and 14 laps at the moment, as Gasly's on pit lane exit already. Colapinto also did a very quick stop. The Alpines having a pretty poor weekend. Gasly retiring after a little bit of a weird braking moment, going into the back of Yuki Tsunoda, ending their race and almost colliding with the back of their teammate Colapinto. And it's unlike Gasly, because so far this season they've had some pretty good moments where they have shone on outright pace. Of course, they DNF'd in Saudi Arabia after a crash of Yuki Tsunoda as well. So, you know, Gasly, no DNFs, no cost damage at all in 2024. And now they've had 2 DNFs this season. I want to double check that, actually, if they have more. We're going to go and see what Gasly did or has done so far this season. And they are the lowest of all the Frenchmen, only scoring points in Bahrain, despite having some really good pace. Of course, Bahrain was a brilliant weekend for them, 7 points, as they have scored 1 in the Miami sprint race. But 2 retirements, yep, Saudi Arabia and Monaco. Other than that, no points being scored and a disqualification in China. And I think they would have scored points there if they weren't to be disqualified. So Gasly having a pretty torrid time so far in 2025. Compared to what they're used to, of course, in 2024. So, you know, you can have good seasons, you can have bad ones. George Russell tops the times by half a second, as it is purple, middle and final sector for the Brit. Is Antonelli into P3. Both on the fresh medium tyres for the Mercedes drivers. 1 tenth away from Lando Norris, 6 tenths away though from his teammate in equal machinery. So, got to be careful of that one. Got to make sure you don't drop too far behind. I'm sure Antonelli will be all good to go. They've had pole already in Formula 1. At least it was for a sprint race. Looking at 2024, the practice 1 lap times, well, the fastest time was from Lando Norris, a 14.228. We're almost there already. Verstappen P2 with a 14.252. Very close behind. And 3.5 tenths behind was Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari with a 14.572. So we're almost there with George Russell. The rest of the field have got a little bit more to do. We've got Leclerc and Verstappen out on the soft tyres. So is Hulkenberg, who goes purple in the final sector. Improves up to where George Russell is. And we do get, in the second half of this session, some soft tyre running, as we were hoping for. We won't see the cars get their full performance, of course. It's going to be a little bit too early to find out that. But the cars will definitely be a little bit better. Of course, we haven't always ran Catalunya for the Spanish Grand Prix. We've seen a few journeys to Valencia for a few of these drivers, but I don't think anybody's driven at Jerez when that was last called the Spanish Grand Prix. Valencia was the European Grand Prix, I do believe. So far, it has just been Catalunya, and it's been Catalunya all the way since 1991. Mercedes have the most wins here, 14 wins. Last winning this in 2021. Ford in 13th, as they will be rejoining Formula 1 next year with Racing Bull and Red Bull as a joint partnership with their powertrains. Ferrari 12 wins in their total, last winning here in 2013. Renault last winning in 2012 with 11 wins. And then we've got Honda with 3 wins. Although it's Honda Rebel powertrains who've got the 2 from the modern era of 2023 and 2024. It's Ferrari who have 12 wins to their name. As a team, it's Mercedes as a team with 9, 8 for McLaren and Williams joined together. Last winning for McLaren in 2005. 20 years ago, they have last won this Grand Prix. They almost had a shot at winning it last year. Now they're going to get a second try. Red Bull, 6 wins to their name. And they've gone pretty well around here. Of course, in 2016, they got an interesting one with Max Verstappen taking their first victory on their first race for the Red Bull team. It's Lewis Hamilton, who has 6 wins here in Catalunya, 4 wins for Verstappen. And Fernando Alonso with 2 in 2006, and the last one for Ferrari in 2013. If Lewis Hamilton was to win here today, or this weekend, then they would take the most wins that a driver's ever taken here and surpass Michael Schumacher, who is currently joint on 6 wins at the moment. Mixed feelings here of how it's going to go for Oscar Piastri. Some people are saying that Oscar Piastri really is going to have some strengths here around Catalunya. Norris, of course, has confidence around here, but looking at the season so far and the way the car's been, this should be a circuit that suits Oscar Piastri a little bit more with the package that they've got. Other people are saying that it's not really been Piastri suited track in the past, historically, over the last couple of years. Of course, 23, 24, the only seasons that they have done. They are now in their 3rd season in Formula 1 and already in the championship lead, winning their first race in their 2nd season of Formula 1 and winning their first sprint race, I believe, in the 1st season of Formula 1. So, Lando Norris, of course, got the blow in Monaco to Piastri's lead. 3 points behind now. The Australian driver, they also finished ahead of Oscar in Imola to take a few more points out as well. So, we've got an interesting situation where Oscar Piastri seemed to be so dominant, such momentum, and then just lost it all after that turn 1 in Imola. It just never really seemed to come back to them, and they're hoping that a familiar scene here at Catalunya will be the point where they can change it before they go to the break after the triple header in Europe here. Currently it's Lando Norris who does beat George Russell's lap time from earlier on that medium tower. Of course, the soft tyres have come out, so now we go through the timing sheet. It's a 13.7 for the British driver. It's Max Verstappen in P2. Hamilton and Leclerc follow each other with a 14.096 and a 14.238. And then it's Piastri, Hadjar, Tsunoda, Russell then in P8. And it's Nico Hülkenberg in P9 with Carlos Sainz improving up to P10, Antonelli in P11, Alonso, Lawson Stroll, Gasly, Colapinto, who are now a bit closer compared to a couple of weekends ago, Behrman, Bortoletto, Martin and Hirakawa in P20. The 2 FP1 drivers currently standing in are at the back but getting good data for themselves and for the team. So this is Yuki Tsunoda's 6th race for Red Bull here. Just an interesting point to talk about. 7th race, sorry, for Red Bull. And Sergio Perez said in 2021, it will take me 6 races to get used to the car. Proceeds to win their 6th race. Formula 1 drivers, if that's what Perez said, maybe should be getting used to the car within 6 races. So it is crunch time here for Yuki Tsunoda, a circuit that they should have confidence at. And it's all about the car and getting on with it thereon. And there's some pressure. There is some pressure, and there is a very, very highly performing Isaac Hadjar. Not too far away in Monaco from their teammate, of course, with a brilliant strategy that they were trying to work with. Double points for the Racing Ball team last time round. For their first ever Monaco Grand Prix as well. Also for both drivers, their first Spanish Grand Prix. And they're going to try and hope for some more success. Isaac Hadjar still very, very young, very new to Formula 1. Would they really try and put the Frenchman into the car? Or are they going to run Yuki Tsunoda all the way to the end of the season? I don't know. It's really, really difficult to call. It's very difficult to call. Oscar Piastri having a big moment on the exit of the hairpin, or even mid-hairpin really. A bit of oversteer as they went a little bit wide, tried to turn the car across, but went really wide and then got onto the marbles a little bit. Managed to hold on to it nicely. Didn't make it very dramatic at all, but it was a moment, of course, nonetheless. Bottas will be out on track and going to set a lap as they slow down. And they get the fresh tyres ready to go on the medium set of tyres. Hirakawa is now on the softs, looking to try and go quickly there. Piastri, the furthest ahead car right now, who's out on track. They're on scrub softs at the moment, 5-lap-old tyres. Of course, with that moment they just had, not feeling too good, but they'll get that confidence very, very quickly. They have the talent to do so. They also have Oliver Behrman 3 tenths behind them. That's a brilliant lap there for the Haas driver. Of course, they're waiting to see what Esteban Ocon can do in FP2 later on, which we will be streaming. So please do join us then. For FP2, we'll do FP3 tomorrow and qualifying. Of course, not the race on Sunday. But it's going to be a hell of a session on Saturday for FP3 and qualifying, of course. FP2 will be good to see, as well as we will be getting some quicker lap times once again. Currently only one car in the 13-second margin. And we see 3 cars beating the FP1 time from last season. $16 minutes on the clock, almost 3/4 of an hour into the session. It's Lando Norris followed by Verstappen, a common sight, a sight that we saw last year in qualifying, but of course it was changed around in the race eventually. Hamilton in P3, it's Leclerc in P4, it's Piastri in P5. And actually, talking about Sunday, last season, we saw George Russell get that brilliant move into turn 1, of course. We also saw Lando Norris, I think he pushed Verstappen all the way up to the line, onto the grass a little bit as well. They still made that move, but George Russell spotted an opportunity and took it. Took the lead of the Grand Prix in due course as well. This was also the circuit, I believe, that a few seasons ago George Russell made the comment on the radio. Is it raining or is it just the sweat in my visor? It was in fact the sweat inside his visor. He was working hard with the Mercedes car, currently having to work a little bit harder in P11 at the moment. That Mercedes not performing as we would expect it to on the harder compound of tyre, or the harder allocation of tyre, of course. Currently, the soft tyre is harder than the hardest tyre that we would have had in Monaco. So, currently, Williams in the pit lane once again. They took a while to get Carlos Sainz out on track, and now they're back in. Only, well, I say only, they've still managed to get 14 laps under their belt, but they have spent a lot of this session in the pit lane, in all fairness. We've got Hamilton out on the hards, a scrub set as well. We've got Leclerc out on the softs as well, with a scrub set of tyres. Hards for Hadjar as well. Now, who's the car with the most running in the session so far? 20 laps for Gasly. Would you be surprised? It is the Alpine. We've also got Antonelli on 20 laps and Martins as well, who was in the pit lane for a while. Colapinto 19, not too far away from their teammate. The Alpine seeming to really try and get some stuff done. It's Russell now on 21 laps though, as Martins is as well. Haas seem to be struggling with the high-speed bouncing once again. A brilliant result from Esteban Ocon in Monaco. Of course, a bumpy circuit still, but the high-speed bouncing, not so much a problem. Of course, Oliver Behrman had a qualifying penalty, so that meant that they weren't able to really do too well with the car. They still didn't get through to a position where Esteban Ocon did. A brilliant drive. Really trading kind of good results are Behrman and Ocon. They're kind of almost matching each other here and there. Points-wise, Esteban Ocon, 20 points, whereas Oliver Behrman, they've only scored 6. Still, yet you get the feeling that Oliver Behrman's not doing a bad job compared to his teammate. Alright, we've got 11 minutes to go on the session. of the session. What are the predictions with the data that we've got at the moment? Well, McLaren are going to be quick. I think it's going to be a 1-2. In the race, in qualifying as well, I reckon it's going to be a Lando Norris pole position. And Oscar Piastri P2. Who's going to be P3? It's just Max Verstappen's circuit, isn't it? I think it's his circuit. The Ferraris are currently going a lot better than I thought. But, that being said, in FP1, last race, I did make my assumptions very, very early on in FP1, and it really didn't bode well by the time we got to FP2 and FP3. Also, the Red Bulls seem to struggle more on Friday than they do on Saturday and Sunday. So, we'll see what they can do. But I think it's going to be a Norris Piastri, Verstappen, and Norris will be taking the lead of the championship once again. I think the Racing Bulls can once again score points, and I think Yuki Tsunoda as well can do very well. The Mercedes are going to have to really try and prove themselves that they can do well without any technical faults. And this time, the Aston Martins won't have the ability to go and put on the medium tyre in qualifying and have an advantage there. So they've really got to try and get the pure pace of the car. Fernando Alonso complaining about straight line speed in their Aston Martin. Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be a little bit more complicated this weekend as we get the regulations stiffer, as we talked earlier on. Of course, we'll talk about them more in FP2. The front wings have been stiffened, the regulations are tighter, intending for the racing to be closer. Will that work out? We don't know. It's FP1. We will never know in FP1. But we do know that Lando Norris is currently fastest with a 13.7 still. No one else has still reached the 13s, but with 8 minutes on the clock, we could see some changes. We've just got Gasly come out onto a pretty used scrub set of hard tyres. But we've got Stroll, Alonso on fresh softs. We've got fresh softs for Colapinto as well, although they've just run on them and they're now in the pit lane again. Eight minutes on the clock. And we'll see what can happen. In these final stages, couple cars in the pit lane, but most all out on track. It is a busy first sector, as you can see. It gets a lot clearer in that final sector. It's about to transfer into the final sector, though. Lewis Hamilton currently continuing on a set of hard tyres. A 20.5 was their last lap time. So really trying to get the race pace in. That's a yellow flag for a moment. Is that Lance Stroll going slowly to allow cars to go through? I'm not entirely sure. Hoping to see what happened there with the yellow, but no, we're not going to see it. DRS disabled in zone 1, so it was in the first sector, which is interesting. But I think it wasn't significant enough to really vote for any drama at all. 6 minutes on the clock, almost everybody out on track right now. A few are leaving the pit lane. And once again, I will say it is pretty busy. so far. Of course, you had a few FP1 drivers on track. Who are doing their best. Hirakawa since going quickly on the soft tyre. It's Antonelli who seems to be struggling. Colapinto, who was closer to his teammate at the beginning of the session, but now is having some problems. And is at the back of the pack once again. Gasly not exactly shining compared to what they had done so far this season, currently in P10. The Mercedes, though, still struggling. P11, P18 for Russell and Antonelli. It's Fernando Alonso who keeps complaining on the radio, saying that he thinks that something is wrong with the car. Currently P13, very close behind his teammate. Currently the Ferraris seeming to perform quite nicely, despite not being expected to do so. Well, relative to the McLarens, I don't know, but relative to the rest of the field at the moment, they're looking pretty cool. Will they hold on to that, though, as the weekend progresses? As the cars dial in and get ready to go absolutely rapid around a more traditional race circuit compared to what we saw in Monaco. And kind of compared to what we saw in Imola as well. It's not a very wide circuit. It's quite narrow. This is as race circuit as it gets. You've got some elevation, you've got some low traction zones, you've got some fairly heavy braking zones as well. Don't have the chicane in the final sector anymore, but we do have the high speed corners. It's all a little bit of everything. A little bit like you get at Silverstone as well, although Silverstone is a much longer lap. Max Verstappen currently, though, looking pretty quick. They're on some fairly fresh scrub set of soft tyres at the moment. Would they improve on this lap? I don't know. But as I did say, they are going pretty quick. They're not going to be improving this lap. They're just getting some standard running in right now. But they have owned this circuit since they turned up to the Red Bull team in 2016. Took a few years away from winning it, but then have gone to win the last 3 Grand Prix here since the new regulation, I think. 2022, 2023 and 2024, where they had a really close battle with Lando Norris. It's Lando Norris who now is going to have a second opportunity of trying to take victory here. Currently topping the times and looking confident, looking to take the championship lead away from their teammate. 2.5 minutes on the clock now. We do wait for these final moments. We wait for all the cars to leave the pit lane to get ready to do their practice starts. Will we see the FP1 drivers do their practice starts? I don't quite know. I would be surprised if not, but I would expect them to do them. Carlos Sainz has had some pretty good running after being sat in the pit lane for so long. The most laps out of anyone. Antonelli 28, 27 for Leclerc. It was looking like it was going to be the Alpines earlier on, but they have since slowed down a lot on the running. Gasly still out on track at the moment, but Colapinto sits in the pit lane with 1.5 minutes to go now. So Colapinto struggling at the moment. On a 5-race contract from when they started in Imola, they've gone through 2. They're now in their 3rd race. They've got to get things going, otherwise they could be in trouble. They, of course, crashed in qualifying for their first weekend. Had some cost damage for that one, but since has been pretty good. Maybe not their confidence, which is a bit strange because it didn't seem to be the case at Williams. They didn't have anything that would knock their confidence. They'd keep pushing that car. maybe crash, but still go quick. It's not really the same story, it seems, so far. So it is strange, but they've got time, a couple of races, and they've just got to make sure that they don't rush it too much. They've got a few cars who, or a few drivers who are waiting in line for a seat, of course, for the Alpine. That's with Paul Aaron and I think Kushmani as well, but also Mick Schumacher. Of course, last racing in 2022, so this could be their final chance of getting back into Formula 1 with that super license. Not entirely sure on the facts of that, though. Would they want Mick Schumacher to come back into Formula 1? Well, it would be a hell of a story, wouldn't it? But it doesn't seem to be the easiest to be driving at the moment. Neither does the Mercedes. As the clock runs down to 0, and we'll see a few cars cross the line. There it is, Carlos Sainz, the first to take the checkered flag here in the first session of Barcelona, the home Grand Prix for Carlos. Hulkenberg crosses the line as well. It was Alonso who was on top earlier on, but has since had some problems with the car, complaining about straight line speed. And they are currently in the pit lane, so is Colapinto. So they will not be doing practice starts today. Every other car will do so, however. Of course, likely starting with Carlos Sainz. No one improves in the end, so we will go through the order. It's Lando Norris who tops the times. It's Verstappen in P2, Hamilton, Leclerc, Piastri, Lawson, Behrman, Hadjar, Tsunoda, Gasly, Russell, and followed by Stroll, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Sainz, Bortoleto, Hirakawa, Antonelli, Martin, and Colapinto. It was George Russell who had a massive understeer moment into the hairpin, almost finding the gravel at the final section of the circuit. And I can confirm that was a 13.718 was the fastest lap time here in FP1. The top 3 beating last year's fastest FP1 session, but only one car is to get into the 13-second margin. We'll see many more cars do that as we go to the second session later on, which we will be live streaming for the Watchalong. We'll be also live streaming tomorrow for Practice 3 and, of course, qualifying as well to see how it goes here in Barcelona. We'll be streaming later on this evening after the FP1 or FP2 session as well, with the F125 game for the first time, doing some practice lobbies. If you do have that game, of course, do hop along as well. But back to F1. It's currently Lando Norris who tops the times. It's Verstappen and Hamilton in P3. Looking pretty good for everyone. I can't wait for the next couple of sessions. We'll get some more details to talk about ready for a few hours' time. Please do join us for FP2. It's going to be a good one. We're going to see the cars get even quicker. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a bit. Lando Norris is on top of the times.